got barbecue back there, and you didn't invite me. Hurt my feelings.
This week on DT Weekly, we're going to be talking about some startup values. Not necessarily, and Mitch made us very aware of this, not necessarily a draft review show. This is solely for picking players that we believe will be a startup value, and we're using a draft that Mitch is currently taking part in. It may have I was going to say it may have wrapped up. We're only on round 18.
Yeah,
but that is going to be our benchmark. So, Mitch, you laid the groundwork for this episode, and you felt like it was important to talk about the players from a player perspective, as opposed to at this point in the offseason being January 13th when we record this, having kind of a draft review show itself.
Yeah, it's okay. Right now on the DD fantasy feed, we have a lot of rookie talk. We have everything, but we don't have a lot of startup Superflex talk. And we've already seen, I think I counted 6 that started already in the Discord. So if you want to join startups, get in the DD Discord so you could see and you could join good leagues. But that's the thing is there hasn't been a lot. And even if you go online and look, there's not really a good spot to go look for startup values right now. So I wanted to make sure that we had a show out there. So if anybody wants to be like, hey, how are we attacking drafts a little bit? We could go, this is kind of like the early show into that. And I'm sure we'll have more shows throughout the spring to really hammer down how we're going to attack these drafts.
My go-to word whenever we're in situations like this is it's very anecdotal. It's just one league. Now, for context, Mitch is taking part in a 14-team Superflex league. What was it, Mitch? You even told us.
Start 12, I think.
Start 12, so super deep, extra point for tight ends. And again, I was going to share the draft board, and Mitch was like, that's not what we're doing here.
That's right. No one cares about this draft. They care about the players that are going to help them in their draft.
What? So it is a 14-team league. So it was interesting. And like I said, very anecdotal, but it's interesting to look at the draft board and to see the way things are positioned from a positional perspective. Obviously, quarterbacks through tight ends, and then seeing where the draft picks go. We're going to be covering a lot in this episode. Hopefully we can be time sensitive, and I'm not ready to go for 3 hours tonight. But Dan, we saw this last year, and we saw it early in the 2024 regular season too, from a value perspective. Somebody like Justin Herbert, elite dynasty asset when you look at it from a Superflex perspective, especially 14 teams. But when you looked at this draft board, was there an elite player that slid in startup value that you think is going to regain their 2024 price tag throughout the course of the offseason, maybe once the season rolls around, but maybe like as we sit here 1 year from today, how you see it playing out?
I'll start with Mitch is a sicko here drafting while we're recording while the NFC playoffs is still going on. But I say that with love. And, you guys, I'm going to go down this, road with you guys here. And, man, you got me going. You got me rejuvenating my rankings and looking at this wild draft board here in the beginning of 2025. And there are a bunch of guys. And that, I have a lot of questions as we're fleshing things out. I'm here looking at all the current teams with NFL head coaches and offensive coordinators that have already been vacated. So that's impacting my rankings. But really early on, like elite guys that are sliding a little bit. You can put an asterisk by all these. And you guys will probably like some of them. You won't like some of them. Our minds will change 15 times during this offseason. But I'm going in order of position, so I don't want to sound like a homer here. But Dak Prescott's a little lower than he could be. Breece Hall, I think, is just kind of like this elite guy that I don't want to say he slid, but what's going on with the Jets? Could he be higher? Etienne, Pacheco, they've got warts on them right now, but they could be really good values if they come back healthy into good situations next year. The Garrett Wilsons, the Olaves, Mark Andrews compared to where he was and how he's finishing right now. And I'm sure there's others, but there were just some guys that I'm just a little intrigued for some reason or another with where they are.
And that's okay. Like we Dan definitely had a more liberal approach when it came to elite, but like there were names that I was looking at on this board, and I had it written down, but I didn't want to say it because it not elite, but Dak Prescott stood out to me in a 14-team league going at the end of the third round. That just seemed like a really nice value to me. You know, he is 31 years old. What's going to happen in Dallas with the coaching situation? Is he ever?
You gave me this segue, JB. As we are recording right now, Dallas has already started talking to Deion Sanders. That report's out there. I did my best. How many minutes are we into the show? 5:39. I didn't even bring it up, but you gave me that.
I did. I left the door open. This was a conversation that took place in the DD Fantasy Discord, but I think Rashee Rice not necessarily was an elite asset a year ago, especially in startups, but he's went 403, like wide receiver 16, depending on how the injury plays out, depending on how the suspension plays out. If his production is anywhere close to what it was early in 24 and the end of 23, I think there's really a chance for him to bump up. Now, I have one, like those are names I wanted to mention, but I have one specific player. Mitch, I want you to give me your answer here.
Okay. So before you say yours that you just already named two, I'm going to give you my one. I'm just catching up. Yeah. Trevor Lawrence.
Okay, I really thought I paused because I thought we were going to have the same answer. Like those are just some guys, like they were the appetizer for me, but the main course is still to come. Trevor Lawrence, that's an interesting one for you because you have not necessarily been an advocate for Trevor Lawrence.
Nope, not at all. So do you want to give yours before I go into mine? No, I finished him, so I'm going to just go through mine. Okay, so Trevor Lawrence was the guy I had written down this morning. So, and the reason for it is he's young enough so he fits like that Justin Herbert fold of, hey, what can happen in this upcoming season if they bring in a good head coach that's going to lead that team to a better opportunity? Because you look around he has Brian Thomas Jr., Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Tank Bigsby. The offensive line isn't bad. It's just like
Travis Etienne. He just skips Etienne.
No, he shouldn't even be on the team next year. But like the offensive line is, you're good. No, I was just saying the offensive line isn't good or bad, right? It's just a middling. Like he has all the talent around him. It's just the coaching has been so bad. The environment's been so bad. So I really think that's one to where if they get the head coach right, we could see Trevor Lawrence right where Justin Herbert is, right towards the end of the first round, early second of startup drafts next year. But I will say, John, you brought up Dak Prescott, and he isn't someone that I thought about till I was in the Heisman voice chat. So if you're in the DD Fantasy Discord, there's the Heisman voice chat. You can go. I was in there for 3 hours today, and we're talking a lot about the Dallas situation and quarterbacks and everything in general in Dynasty. And I really think Dak is the best value you could get right now. The only thing is he's going to be 32. So it's really where his dynasty value ceiling is going to be. But I think as far as like a points per game next year, I think he is probably the best value you could get as a quarterback right now in startup drafts.
Yeah, when we look at those quarterbacks, Dak going at 3-1-3 in this deep draft, like I think this is Dak's last run. I like that you brought up his age, Mitch, because like I am a little worried with that leg injury, and he's had a few injuries now. But I think this is an offense that still has a lot of potential. It could be based on efficiency. And if we're talking about like guys that have really high scoring potential that slid, is why I love Dak. And then I mentioned Etienne for the reason like Mitch just buried him. And he went really late. And I think the 8th round there were a couple running backs that if they get back to health and productive offenses, that's a nice landing spot for them.
This was a fun question for me because there were very particular criteria that have to be met. You talk about like the prompt itself. We kind of went away from that a little bit, but an elite player. So I'm sitting here thinking it's got to be somebody that's on the young side, because otherwise they're not really going to catapult themselves back up. They had to have had a nice 2023 season to put themselves up there. 2024, a little disappointing, but maybe they came on towards the end and their value hasn't spiked back up to where it was. And then the expectation of 2025 and beyond. And for me, this is a 2 PPR league for tight ends.
I know who you're going with now. I know who you're going with.
And that's why I thought you might say him, because then I looked to see who took him in the draft, and it was Mitch in the 3rd round, 14 picks after Trey McBride, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but it's Sam LaPorta. Mm-hmm. And if you look at what he has done over the last 6-7 weeks, he was right there with Bowers on a per game in PPR, on a per game perspective. And this is a guy that in 2 PPR formats was going back into the first just a year ago. So for me, it's Sam LaPorta. I think you look at it. I just don't know if you can look at a running back, because Gibbs still going super high, even with all these quarterbacks getting bumped up in this particular format. Bijan, super high. I just don't know. Etienne,
Breece is kind of the big one. Breece kind of has that little bit of a hit to where he could go up, but we have so many good running backs coming in this draft that, if he comes in next year as Dynasty running back 6, I'm not sad about that. It just means there's a lot of good running backs in the NFL right now.
And Dan mentioned Breece. I actually thought about him, but then I was steering away from the running back position. And then I was all right, guys and we talked about this on Trending last week, Mitch, but Olave and Jalen Waddle, those are guys that make sense from to fit the criteria to really bump up. Brandon Ayuk, it almost can't be a running back in my mind. It's got to be somebody that meets all those other criteria. So let us know as you watch this video, who is somebody, and we can say elite, we could just say first 5 round startup, pick somebody that has dropped in value, but you believe is going to rise in value here over the next 12 months. And I think the example you put in the notes here for us, Mitch, kind of looking a year ago, was Justin Herbert. There was that negative narrative. He wasn't going to throw the ball. And then you look, and again, this is a 14-team league, so it's going to be adjusted a little bit when you look at the positions whenever you go to 12 teams. But Justin Herbert was the 9th overall pick, and I can't disagree with that, despite that absolute bust of a game.
I want to go back to LaPorta really quick. And JB, it's funny, Mitch, before the show, before you came on, JB's yawning and he's exhausted. And then somewhere in this, we're 13 minutes in, I think the 5-hour energy kicked in. And I think that was about 300 words without a breath, if I'm not mistaken. But he covered 4 players in 2 minutes, and we couldn't even analyze any of them. But that's okay, JB. But no, busting your chops. I love you, man. But LaPorta, did you trade for him, Mitch? Or did you trade to get into it? Oh, you picked him at 3 too.
Yeah, did you
trade? Wait. We don't want to get into the draft, but I actually had 2 picks in the 3rd. I picked LaPorta, and then I traded out of my other 3rd round pick. So yes, I did trade for it, but I would have chosen him in 2 more picks if I didn't make that trade previously.
Yeah. I'm more looking at tight end strategy, Mitch, to know if someone snaked you and
we'll get into that a little bit later. I like the whole. There's some tight end talk coming up.
That was a teaser.
Okay. So again, like the video. I know you're subscribed to the DD Fantasy channel here. Go over to check out ddfantasyfootball.com. A lot of good resources, a lot of good material there. And then get in the DD Fantasy Discord community. On to some draft pick talk. Mitch, outside of the 101 rookie pick, we are seeing rookie pick values drop compared to previous seasons. 102 was pick 33. Do you see them as a value at this time of year, or are they peak? Or are they at their peak? Oh my gosh, in startups.
Yeah, I think this year's a little bit rough. It's another talk we were having today that I think the 101, and you're going to get someone to buy into Ashton Jeanty in every league. I think you're going to be able to do the same with McMillan, right? Like those guys are going to be okay. Like the 101, 102, I could see them moving up in startup drafts. When you hit that 103, 104, 105, you're talking about those players against established veterans in the league right now. So we're talking about, for anyone who doesn't do startups like this, I actually found out there's still people who do startups as you get your startup picks and then your rookie pick is in the reverse order. Don't do that. That is like the worst way to play Dynasty ever. You have the rookie picks in the draft. You end up choosing a kicker. Then the commissioner goes in, and throws the rookie picks in there. But I think 103 to 106, 107, I think they're at their peak because you're looking at a Sanders there. You're looking at a Ward there. I could see Hampton going, Hampton could probably boost that value a little bit, but those quarterbacks we're not in love with. So you're like, hey, do I want Shedeur Sanders or do I want a Jared Goff right now? I'm taking Jared Goff right now because I just believe points per game wise, it's going to work out better. And that leads you into the Mayfield look at it as well. I just don't see these picks jumping up other players unless someone's like, you know what? I'm just going to go completely young and draft all those picks a little bit early because I want a super young team. I think that's the only way it's going to happen. But I think it's going to be really, really hard to end up moving these 103 to 106 picks in established leagues. And then in startups, I think their value is kind of crap.
I just want to share this very quickly. Okay. So we're looking at this and I went through this startup, not looking at the draft board here. So Mitch can't yell at me, but I went cumulative by position. And then I also did position by round, but looking at it from a cumulative perspective through 3 rounds, 42 picks. You had 18 quarterbacks, 6 running backs, 12 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, 3 picks. Only 3 picks. Now, part of me is thinking, okay, maybe that's strictly because this is a 14-team league. Do those be like those picks, the 101, the 102, like I think even a 14-team league, Ashton Jeanty, he's going to be the 101. But then it's like previous seasons, the 101, 102, 103, 104, especially in this format, were elevated because they were quarterbacks. They were guys that people felt comfortable with. And while we've seen how recent draft classes have played out, it looks pretty good from last year, at least, if you went that route. But like you said, I mean, you could even go down to the 5th round in this draft. It's like, would you rather a Michael Penix or a Shedeur Sanders?
That's exactly where I think that value is.
Or a Cam Ward. So I actually, I agree with, I do think in startups, they are traditionally overvalued a little bit. And part of the reason is like, okay, I'm going to take a pick. Oh, well, it's going to gain value. Not if you've already taken it at where that perceived peak is. That's a common mistake that a lot of people make when it comes to startups. So I think if they keep the value that we saw here in a 14-team league, and then we translate it to a 12-team league, I think the picks are a little bit more valuable because a lot of them are going to be running backs at this point in time. Sure, we're going to get a couple quarterbacks. We're going to get Tet. We're probably going to get Luther Burden. But it's going to be driven by running backs. And that's just something that isn't going to drive the value of picks in a startup in 14-team settings.
Or even 12. I don't think it's going to change in 12, to be honest with you.
But you don't think, like, after Gibbs, Bijan, the 101, maybe 3 or 4 more running backs, you don't think the 102 and 103 are going to be seen right after that?
I think the 102, yeah. I don't think the 103. I think that 103 is in a very bad tier right now. Unless you're just flat out saying that there's not going to be a quarterback the first 3 picks. If that's your case, then yeah, if you're saying Hampton's going to be your 103, then yeah, I'm all about it. That pick probably should be higher in value. But if that ends up, as we go through the tiers and we're doing all these mock drafts and everything, if it ends up being Sanders and Cam Ward there at the 103, 104, 105, yeah, I don't see those values moving up.
I have 102 and 103 right now tiered together because I'm looking at it from a prospect perspective. Say that 5 times fast. And I'm looking at Amari and Hampton and Caleb Johnson very similar. So I have those actually, like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but my first 3 picks right now in rookie drafts, 12-team Superflex formats, are running backs. And that goes against a lot.
You hate McMillan. Holy.
I don't hate Tet, but I have him at 104. I have him that 104 tier. But anyway, my point is I have that 102 and 103 in the tier of pick overall 30 to 44. So that really does fall in the bucket that we're talking here. Like, I don't know how much more I could move them up. Like, it's just with the way this class is built. Dan's throwing timeouts at me.
Yeah, I think the one wrench in that, though, JB, if you're looking at a 14-team format with a tight end premium that Mitch is drafting in right now, Tyler Warren, to me, goes ahead of Tet there. Like, boy, how valuable was Brock Bowers just a year ago? I think we're getting another generational tight end into the draft. I don't want to get ahead to our tight end talk later on, but, boy, when you start tearing it out and looking at your options, Tyler Warren, man, that's a gem here. Somewhere probably earlier than this pick went in this 14-team startup.
Oh yeah, see, that's part of the interesting dynamic here because you look at it. I chose to look at it from the running back, quarterback perspective. You're looking at it tight ends. I think you're going to have a lot of people. Tyler Warren is going to get the draft capital. If he gets a landing spot like Denver or the Chargers, I think there's a case right off the bat. People have him tight end 4, maybe 3. If you want to bump LaPorta down because people were that disgusted.
Chargers are going to go Warren, then Scatterbro. They're in the second. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome.
I cannot wait for the NFL draft. But like, Dan, do you think the picks might be a value still at this point? Is that?
I think they could be a little bit. Like, even the 101 for rookie where it went in this draft, when I see that pick go after Nico Collins and Brock Purdy,
But again, I think that's because it's a 14-team league.
It's one example.
Everybody's seeing that as the Ashton Jeanty.
Right. I mean, and I even like Mr. Sanders at quarterback before Brock Purdy, to be honest with you.
Get out.
I love it, Dan. I love it.
I gotta let JR know we need some fire graphics.
I think there is some value there.
Oh, value for Sanders in the middle. Let's call late second round in a 14-team league. I don't think so.
I mean, 14 teams start 2 quarterback, and again, there's just a couple guys that
before Goff. Come on,
Mitch, tell him about Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I'm not picking Kyler, but
so you're also taking.
I don't know about Sanders though.
I'm saying 14-team league. There's a potential for these rookie picks to bump a little bit higher.
No, honestly, if we're gonna hit on Sanders real quick, really, I value him really close to Penix. To me, I think Sanders is a little bit better. He's a little bit younger, but Penix is in a great situation, and who knows what Sanders is going to end up with. Let's say the Titans end up picking him. What do they even have around him at that point? And so it's something you got to take a hold of is these coaching changes, and everything's going to play a little bit of a part as we move forward.
And we saw 7 picks go before Michael Penix here. So you're making the assumption there were 7 picks. Sanders is well gone. Cam Ward is well gone.
Yeah. And
I don't know there. I don't know.
I love those pedigree players too, man. With Shador.
God, no.
You do.
I think he's meant for the moment. He can handle it.
I'm going to call you Mr. Levi because you are all about the genes. That's how you are.
All about the genes.
All right. So some rookie talk there. Again, let us know in the comments, where where should these rookie picks be valued? Whether you want to talk about it from a 12-team perspective, 14 teams, whatever the case may be, let us know in the I almost said chat, in the comments. Dan, give me a veteran wide receiver that is going to vastly outproduce their current ADP, just based on this specific draft this upcoming season. So we had Godwin. He was overall wide receiver 2 pre-injury. Mike Evans, he was top 10 in points per game. Who stands out to you as one of the best values here at their current price?
As I dug through this, and again, a different draft, it would be someone else, but just the way this guy fell so far, and I think there's still more gas in the tank and probably a better opportunity for him next year. Again, a little bit of a homer here, but at 14.13, Amari Cooper, man, like he's going to go somewhere and someone's going to need him. And I think he's going to end up in a role where he's going to get volume again, or Buffalo does something different where maybe he has a better role and he's tied to Josh Allen. I just think that late, that's almost like the end of this draft here as far as like the talent really thinning out. That's a great value for Amari Cooper. I'm not happy the way this season ended with him. I'm not basing on anything of kind of where we're at, but I know he had some injuries this year. Again, I watched him in this last game versus Buffalo. He's running routes. He caught some passes, did his role, but I think there'll just be a better role. It's a little bit of a guess saying he's going to have a better role in 2025.
Mitch, let me ask you something before so I'm going to give you kind of a package question situation here. So we have that, but then also with it being a 14-team league, do you feel like vets are pushed down even further because people are so worried of players aging out on the roster post startup?
Oh, I think that's just you're doing a startup in January and February, and this is what happens. Like, I think vets just get pushed down so hard because they're just so worried about aging out, like what you said. So I think this happens in the vast majority of leagues. That's why I had a little bit of a strategy going into this draft is I was super young through 10 rounds. And then I took like Amari, I took Nick Chubb. I went really old after that because there's all these players that I think are going to produce next year, but they're not like the core of my team.
Chubb in the 17th. I just saw that.
Yep. Sure did.
That's worth a shot there.
Sure, why not? Right? Exactly.
So give me your veteran wide receiver, Mitch, as we're looking at this board.
Honestly, I looked at Amari too. The one that I ended up going with was Diontae Johnson. Because like this has just been a really, really weird year for him. But if you look on KTC where he's valued, wide receiver 89, which is, I mean, it's KTC thing, so we don't really count that. I think he was wide receiver 50 something in the draft that I did, but he's 29 years old. He had games with 13 targets, 14 targets, 10 targets this year, but something just happened this year. So you hope it's not something that moves forward. But what if he just stays with the Texans? You're telling me you have Nico. Diggs already said he might not be back there. You know, Dell's not going to be back. Then you have Diontae in a pass-first offense, and I think this is going to continue to be a pass-first offense. I love him there. And so for the value you could get him at right now, I think he could easily end up really outproducing where you're getting him at in pretty much any draft from now through. It's going to be a while.
Yeah, I mean, it has been such a weird season for him. Mm-hmm. We saw the stretch, obviously, with the Panthers whenever, it was Bryce Young, Andy Dalton, Bryce Young, but then go into the Ravens seemingly being an issue, distraction there, and then go into the Texans. And, well, he still hasn't really seen any playing time. Looking at the board, this was an easy one for me. And I don't know if it's going to surprise anybody, but we got a dude averaging 14 points per game, and he is 20. I don't want to mess this up. He's 29 years old. But at the age of 29, he's having his best season ever with an emerging quarterback.
Courtland Sutton.
Courtland freaking Sutton, boys. Like wide receiver 40 something. At 10-4, again, with it being a 14-team league. Like, the dude continues to be disrespected. And I just saw Devontae Adams went after him That dude, I don't want to sound like Dan, but that dude can still play.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm in a situation, existing league startup, if those are the values of Sutton and Davante Adams in the 10th round, whenever, again, 10th round, 14 team league, whenever Tyreek Hill is at 701, McLaurin is at 614. Like, I love Terry McLaurin, but he's the same age here as Courtland Sutton. Why is there such a massive discrepancy there? So we're looking at, like I said, Terry, like, it's just too much of a difference there with very minimal difference in production in a very similar situation. You got a rookie quarterback that came in really, I don't want to say overachieved, but they definitely at least met expectations.
I almost chose Sutton. If it wasn't like a 5-round gap between him and Cooper, probably would have been my guy. But, you know, he had a presence in that playoff game this postseason, Sutton. Just think if Denver gets a run game or a tight end, like just something to complement him. I mean, that's really an offense that had some juice and not a lot of talent. So I'm really interested to see what Denver does this offseason.
I know this was just wide receiver, but can I make a comment on 2 vet running backs, guys? And I'm going to do it anyway, whether or not you say yes. And I made a trade in our Dynasty Theory 2.0 league. But when you look at vet running backs, and everybody wants to look from a Dynasty perspective, okay, let's look out 3 years. You can't do that at running back. Let's look out 2 years. Probably can't do that in most situations when you look at running back. If you say, all right, pick 2 veteran running backs where you feel most confident in making a wager on the way they're going to be used in 2025, and their situation is not going to change.
Saquon Barkley.
No, I'm going lower.
Sorry.
Yeah, Saquon too. I mean, Saquon going in the 3rd, but in the 7th, Derrick Henry and David Montgomery, like, the Lions aren't going to draft a running back.
Nope.
The Ravens are going to run Derrick Henry into the ground. So those are 2 vet running backs that I'm looking at. And I think we always talk about which managers in your leagues have certain players. If you know there's a manager that is always, the offseason hits, they're looking to dump their vets, they're looking to get rookie draft picks, I think you can get both Derrick Henry and David Montgomery at a very reasonable price. In this specific league, it was an extra 0.15 points per carry. And I moved Jerry Jeudy, Travis Etienne, and 204. And that's not a move that would have gotten done, mid-season. So at this point in time, I feel very confident in both of those backs. So I just wanted to mention them. And I'll be honest with you, when I have my notes here, I just read it as what veteran is going to vastly outproduce.
That's fair.
So that's actually the reason I included the running backs. But and anything else on the veteran wide receivers there, guys?
There's such strong values right now that I think it's really smart to grab. Dan does this all the time too, where he will grab the one young core wide receiver and then build the talent around that later. So like, you don't have to get the 2 really young ones, get that one young core piece. For Dan, it's always CeeDee Lamb, right? But besides that, but then he could build the rest of the roster with Mike Evans, Davante Adams, whoever, and it's not hurting him because he has that one stud to build around.
Yeah, and there's a lot of depth at receiver. It'll get amped up too with the rookies coming into the league, but there's even some younger non-vet receivers that I look here that, have some potential to help your roster next year. One guy that I thought was interesting, I'll throw just one quick name, is Rashad Bateman. And it's kind of an ugly one, but no one ever gets excited about this guy. We've kind of tossed him out there in Dynasty Theory this year, and then we just kind of move on. And he got some juice. Flowers went out 2 weeks ago and he looked good. I think a little more of the problem is just the volume, because it's still a Flowers and Henry and Lamar and Andrews. But the Ravens said, hey, we like this guy at the beginning of the year. He's our number 2. We believe in him. And they followed through with what they said. He was their number 2. I just wish there was a little more production. But I just bring him up because there's talent there. And he went, 13th round. It's a nice little value that can't hurt you.
The talent's certainly there. I mean, it was a profile I loved coming out of college, and just, well, injuries and then a bit of a disappointment. So
it might be better like best ball dynasty than regular dynasty.
Yeah. Always those guys that are better in best ball. Now, Mitch alluded to it earlier in the show, and kind of a foreshadowing, if you will. But Dan, I want to start with you on this last question. It looks like the tight end fever, especially based on existing leagues, based on fantasy calc, so trades that are taking place. When you go on Dynasty Daddy and you look at the trade database, and specifically in this startup, again, 2 points for tight ends for receptions. It looks like the tight end fever has calmed down a little bit. Everybody was looking to load up on the tight ends, especially in these types of formats. And it looks like it's possible to draft 2 of the top 4 tight ends, maybe go with that bully tight end approach without really having to trade up. Is this something you're looking to do? And this kind of ties in. I love this question because it kind of ties into what we talked about. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Or last week was our first episode of 2025. So it was last week about the just roster construction, and do you want to be overweight on a certain position? So based on what we have in front of us, Dan, is that something you'd be looking to approach with the tight ends?
I think it's tough in a startup to take that bully approach as far as taking 2 of them. And then what does that leave you with? Now, there were some dynasty playoff games this year that I played a couple of those rosters that had like McBride and LaPorta or McBride and Bowers. And I'm like, oh snap, I'm scared. That's a lot of premium coming at you if those guys hit. And if you're the owner in the league that has 2 of them, man, that gives you a lot of trade value, a lot of production. So I could see it. I definitely think, you almost have to take the approach of getting one if you can. I mean, I don't want to say force it, but man, I break down the tight ends now, and we've spent a lot of time. I mean, we do every year. We look at the tight end market, and I feel like every year we're on the cusp of it, and then something kind of sways. A year ago, I couldn't get rid of George Kittle. Boy, I'm thankful that in like 1 or 2 of my leagues that people didn't want him, because what a year that he had. And when you can't get a Bowers or a McBride or a LaPorta, you want him. We're Dynasty, though. We still like the youth. As we go into this year, hey, Kittle's another year older. I still like him. Kelsey's another year older. Hawkinson, Andrews aren't as sexy as those top guys. I have Bowers in a tier by himself, McBride in a tier by himself. If you want to just say those 2 are a tier, you could go that way as well. And then I'm where Mitch was in that, hey, I don't get those 2. I sure heck want LaPorta, because there's not much else after that. So I don't mind it. I wouldn't judge anybody and say, oh, that's a terrible approach, taking 2 tight ends early. But like if you're in a 14-teamer like Mitch is here and you got to start 2 quarterbacks, I don't want to play with that fire either and get stuck with, Matthew Stafford and Derek Carr in a 14-team dynasty startup. So I would proceed with caution with being a bully, but I do understand it.
There is that opportunity cost, that's for sure, where if you're passing on other players, other position groups, and you're loading up on that one specific position, you're going to be lacking elsewhere, obviously. And, yes, you are getting those top tight ends in a position where positional scarcity is everything, but you could tie into your roster construction. Maybe you load up on the tight ends early, and then you're trading back. You're getting future draft capital. Maybe you're looking to tank this year. That doesn't look half bad. Mitch, where are you on this? Because historically, you've been a big tight end guy.
Yeah, I'm back into it again. If I think everyone gets a little sad when the draft order comes out. You get the 110 or the 111. You're like, oh, that means I can't get Josh Allen. But that leads you to this approach, because you could get your CJ Stroud, whoever is your quarterback at the end of the first, or you get the tight end first, then whoever in the second round is your quarterback, right? But you grab McBride there, or if Bauer somehow falls that far, sure, you take him. And then the third round, you grab LaPorta. I think it is such a good move to make now. And the reason for it is if you have 2 of those guys, there's 9 other teams you're playing that don't have like a top 5 guy at that point. And so you're going each week, you have, you're already going to be winning the positional battle at tight end. You're probably be winning at least one of the flex battles because those guys score better than most flex players do anyways. I think it's a really, really strong way to attack leagues if you have the 109, 110, through the 112 in a startup draft.
Have you, tying in another old conversation, but would you be looking to go that route? Let's say it's a 12-team super flex, start 10, typical, 1.75 for tight ends. You have the 111. You've talked previously about double tapping running backs in that spot. Would you be more likely to go Bijan Gibbs or QB McBride and then try to grab LaPorta in the third or fourth if he's available?
QB and then the tight ends, if possible.
Okay.
And the reason for it, because I just think there's going to be a lot more running backs that we could use in Dynasty moving forward because of the way the NFL is moving into more of a rushing game than the passing game than it has been previously.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, like we look at this draft class specifically with the running back position. It's like, okay, there's top end talent. There's so much depth. It's such a good class. But when you inject all of this strong depth into the league, they're going to start to cannibalize each other, right? Like you have these veterans, you have the new guys coming in. It's going to be an interesting dynamic. But like you said, Mitch, with the way the defense has been playing, we saw the positional advantage at the running back. And we talked about it last week. I think what was out of the top 10 players in a WAR per game perspective, I think they missed 6 games this year at the running back position total, which is just absolutely absurd to think about. Overall, I probably wouldn't be looking to do it. And this ties into what I said last week about the more balanced approach. Now, you look at it, we have Bowers super early. Okay, obviously. McBride, LaPorta. And then you have that gap. And then in the 5th, we got Hawkinson and Kittle. And then you start, get Andrews. But then you get the tight ends that are young and promising. And still, I don't even want to say promising, but people still have that hope in Kincaid and Kyle Pitts. If I have to pick between Kincaid and Pitts in the 6th in this format, or Engram and Jake Ferguson in the 9th, I know which way I'm going.
Exactly.
Give me, one more solid year from Engram, maybe 2 years from Ferguson. Let's just call it 2. Please, yes.
Yeah, this is the time I won't be at Homer, and I went to bat for Fergs last year, with my Cowboys, but man, Schoonmaker didn't look much worse than Fergs, and JB, I know you brought up the the system, being the thing for Dallas there versus the talent, and I know Dak was hurt, and maybe that impacted some things, but regardless, whether we're talking Fergs or Pitts or Ingram or Jonnu or Goddard, I don't want to go down that ride if I don't have to, man. Let me just enjoy, Bowers, McBride, LaPorta, the youth, the talent, the situation.
But if you don't land them, that's what I'm saying. If you don't land them at their,
then you really got to be intentional, and I would almost draft 2. Who else could you get? And that's where I'm liking Mark Andrews a lot. I think health is the key to that guy's success, but I think he still has it. Kittle, you write it out, but Tyler Warren, that's where that pick comes in. I think you got another chance to get one of those young guys if you miss out. I think he's going to be a legit dude, and we'll see about Colston Loveland. There's a little bit of an influx of tight end talent coming.
There's a lot of good talent coming at the tight end position. I'm looking Kyle Pitts in the 6th or Pat Freiermuth in the 11th. Why?
Yeah.
Yep.
Doesn't make sense to me. So, Mitch, do we have time for one more question?
I don't think so. We're at 45 minutes. This is where we've been trying to keep the show.
Okay.
We could leave this next one for any upcoming show because it's not startup related, really.
Okay. Well, we'll leave people. We'll leave that carrot dangling. Maybe it is good that we're quitting here at 45.
See,
leave that carrot dangling in front of everybody for a future episode. So for the 274th time, Dan, we're going to go back to our regular order. I didn't like mixing it up last week. Dan, final thoughts. What do you got for our DT Weekly listeners?
Hey, man, for our DT listeners, this is just a warm-up to this offseason. I think I said in the chat talking to Mitch and John, I think this is just the start of that puzzle. That's going to change a lot. Picture that big 1,000-piece puzzle that's, on your dining room table there, and you're missing pieces, and it's just taking some time, and then you get frustrated and you go back to it. That's what we're doing. We've got a lot of rookies to break down in the future. The quarterback dynamic's interesting as we're here in the playoffs. Darnold, 2 turnovers as we record here. I was really curious whether the Vikings would give him an extension. Do they let him go? Do they trade McCarthy? We've heard all the rumors, but there are a lot of questions to be answered at all these positions. But I'm sure just like, Mitch and John here, our tiers and our rankings keep changing. Stay tuned. There's a lot more to come.
It's going to be an action-packed, just jammed with so much content here with the entire DD fantasy football team. Mitch, final thoughts. I didn't forget about you, buddy. What do you got?
You're good. For all those that are still watching on YouTube, only thing I've been able to see this whole show is Dan's chair. That star underneath, the leather looks like it's starting to tear a little bit. Like McCarthy's getting fired. Jerry's getting older. I'm just a little bit worried that this is just leading us down a bad path with the Cowboys when I see that chair.
Man, I just noticed that, Mitch. Thanks for pointing that out. We got to do a little touch-ups there on the leather chair. But you're right, Mitch. It's time for Coach Prime to rejuvenate the Cowboys organization.
Use code Theory, get 50% off your first month over at ddfantasyfootball.com. Jump in the Discord. It really is a fantastic community. For Mitch Sorensen, Dan Lamagna, I'm John Bauer. We'll catch everybody next week.